Hi, how's everyone doing today? My name's Amy Hamilton. I'm the author of The Project Manager and The Consummate Communicator. What I have to say is today has just been the most tremendous day so far. I am doing 24 authors in 12 hours. It is interviews with these amazing authors on all of their different subjects and everything else. And I am talking to Matt Zinman, who is running between different interviews and everything else. And it's so crazy in this virtual world that we can all connect in this environment. So I was just met Matt virtually, never actually met him in physical space yet, and met him through some mutual author friends. And when I heard about his book, I was so intrigued because it was this word I'd never heard of before. It was like Z-isms. And I was like, I don't even know how to say this word. And so I was like, I have to get Matt on my show. So Matt, can you please tell us a little bit about what Z-isms is and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Amy. I know I'm kind of like getting myself together here in midstream. Z-isms, or, depending on where you are in the world, you might say Z-isms. So in terms of pronunciation, it's fine either way. We're looking at those pearls of wisdom, those life lessons and guiding principles we all have that we've gained through our life experiences that we share with others to help them grow. So that was really the impetus for the book, and and just sharing my own experiences through time and telling with the reader, having like a personal conversation, like we're in like in a coffee shop or something like that. And it's been very well, received. You never know, right, until a book comes out, how it compares, what people are going to think, and it's been great. I really appreciated all the feedback.
Oh, that is good to hear. And so when you're writing a book, it can sometimes be challenging. Some people say, oh, the writing process flowed. It was the editing that was bad. Some people say it was all great. And then they marketed their book and then no sales, but they had to keep persevering. So what about you, Matt? How do you stay motivated?
I'm innately motivated, quite honestly. It's through many years of grit and gaining, I think, a no quit attitude. Being an entrepreneur since 2002, founding a nonprofit, just wanting to make a difference. I think that's really been my innate driving force, and having the opportunity to have the inflection point just over a year ago to start the book, and like you said, um, you know, getting into the process of writing the book, and having that inspiration and what keeps you going. It might have just been a blog. I put my head down for a couple of days, and I had all these various concepts. I've been wanting to write it for about 15 years, and to look at, well, what would I regret not doing? At that inflection point, it's like, okay, I gotta put my head down. And after a few days of it, it's like, yeah, I really do have something here, and just getting into action. For anybody out there who's interested to write a book, have had that in them. That's my advice, is just put your head down for a few days and see what you've got. And then for me, it was almost, I've almost come too far, to turn back. So just kept going, and it's great to have it done, and to be even more rewarding and fulfilling to be talking about it, and having the opportunity. Thank you very much for being here with you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. So my book was supposed to launch in May, and I delayed the launch because of COVID. And I kept thinking, oh, the world's going to open up. The world's going to open up. But now we're like in a very different space. And I think you're very similar, that you had kind of some, perception of how your book launch was going to go, and then the reality. Do you want to share that at all?
Yeah, well, there's a huge reality check, right, in this year, to say the least. I mean, my book came out at the end of March. Same, that launch party, the signing, everything at the last minute got canceled with what is COVID, and a number of adjustments as well. I mean, I had, I was grateful to have the time period to be able to do it, but for me, it was somewhat of a one-off. I mean, I of course I believe in the book. I mean, I didn't write it in conjunction with a coaching business or anything like that. I wrote it out of my pocket, and wanted to an experience to go back to the nonprofit, which is the Internship Institute, and I've been doing that for 15 years. Well, in addition to not having book signings, there's not a lot of internships happening either. And so, one thing leads to another, and not really having an end game with the book led me to, of course, having post interviews, like this for a number of months ever since. And I've really enjoyed leaning in. And through a particular coincidence, which is, I think a longer story than our 30-minute slot here. But it led me to reconsider, the direction I'm going and with the book, and led me to start a podcast, which I'm now 20 something episodes into after just a few months. And I'm just really having the time of my life. So just on this new trajectory, and, in a way it's kind of, how your calling finds you, has been my experience here.
That is such a good share, Matt. And it's really interesting. Earlier we had Sabi, and he's talking about this whole concept of what's your plan B. And so often people don't have a plan B. They're like, this is my strategy. This is my game. You had your strategy. You had your game. You're like, this is what I'm going to do. And then life kind of changed pretty quickly for you. And so what advice do you have to people who are unsettled or going through this time right now where they're having to make these major changes because of COVID?
Right. Well, for one, I mean, fortunately, my wife and I, we have, I'm partnered with her in another business. And so we had, when you say plan B, you think of, how you're going to pay the rent per se. And fortunately, we're able to do that. Now, as far as 15 years in life's work into the nonprofit, and what do I do now? Plan B. For to your question, more specific to listeners, as opposed to, more background about myself, does actually, bring up the main thing that I talk about, which is earned confidence, and the fact that we have all been through everything that we have in our lives, and, trials, tribulations, everyone has that, and we're still standing. And what that, as simple as it sounds, it helps you realize that no matter what comes your way, you're going to get through it, just the same as you have everything else in your life. And what that also enables you to do is ground yourself in that earned confidence, to not have to worry, to not have the anxiety. And of course, there are some natural feelings that you have to fight off there. But when you rationalize this with yourself, you realize, well, what do I have to worry about? And what is worry? It's an expectation of something that you don't want to happen. So that's not a really good way to set an expectation in the first place, because what we expect tends to happen. So I think that even though anyone going through what they're going through, to your question, might not have the answer, what they do know is that we're survivors, that we've always made it through, and that we'll figure out a way, just as we always have. And we're in that process now, if that's what anyone is experiencing.
No, I think that is really powerful, and it's such an important time right now. And part of the reason this event came about is in different authors forums, people are like, I don't have a way to market my book. I was just counting on this and this and this, and I have this whole rotation through these indie coffee houses, or I had this big speaking engagement, or all my speaking engagements, depending on what it is that you rely on. And instead, we found ourselves in this point where we were like, okay, we are looking for something more. And I was just kind of brainstorming this with a few other authors, and everybody kept saying, well, somebody should do this. And then eventually I was like, wow, I have a computer. I can do this. And it's this really empowering thing, which you kind of alluded to. And I'd love for you to talk more about your podcast, that you're sitting there and you're at home, and suddenly you realize, like, I have all the tools I need to empower myself.
Right.
And if you could share both how you empowered yourself, and then recommendations for those who are listening on how they can empower themselves.
Right. Well, first of all, going on radio and podcast interviews, a lot of them won't have you on if you don't have an external mic. I mean, you kind of have to, you have to get the nice mic in order to have the invites. I already had the equipment. And, again, it's one of those things, like, I started to lean in with the interviews, and then I knew nothing about podcasting. And I fell in through that coincidence to a course that really taught me, on a steep learning curve, what I needed to know, and then just kind of going for it. And in terms, it's called Insights to Live By, and I'm doing both solo shows and guest shows. So the solo shows are somewhat about expanding on concepts in the book, such as Earn Confidence. And then the guest shows, again, are for people to come on and share their Z-isms and pearls of wisdom, if you will, their insights to live by. And in terms of advice for people, I think, again, it comes back to, you might not know the answer. I'm just, I'm in my 50s now. Like, I don't know anything about podcasts. I never had the time to listen to podcasts. What's a podcast? Until I actually went on to it. And now in having one, you'll learn out of necessity, you learn out of passion. And, I'm still figuring it out in terms of this new trajectory for, where it's going to take me. And then, setting your intentions and setting goals. So for me, and having the opportunity to make a difference and wanting to do that and have that impact, it brings me back to, well, my original introductions where, Matt Zinman, and, he wants to personally impact, as many people as possible, or positively impact. I'm like, well, it's just kind of flighty. It's not specific enough. And I wanted to be that. And I, kind of laid out that I want to personally enrich the lives of at least 100 million people by 2025, and just set that goal. And I don't see, well, how are you going to do that? And the answer is, well, I have some of those answers. I don't have all of those answers, but I believe that I can do that. And I wouldn't set a goal if I didn't believe it. And the same thing goes for anybody else. Is, what is that vision? What is that self-belief? And then powering yourself with that self-belief, working backwards from that vision. Set that point B, and you might not know how to get from here to there, but if you know where you're going and what you want to achieve, and you have that self-belief, that's what's going to get you there.
I think you bring up a great concept in that we know where we want to go. We kind of have an idea of how we think we're going to get there, but it might not always work out. And we always have to have that flexibility. And it's, where so many of us are. Like, I was planning, I'm going to have this big stage, and I'm going to present this book, I'm going to present Admiral Stavridis, and really people aren't there to listen to me. They just want to listen to him and kind of do this concept. And then it was like, oh, let's delay the launch. Let's delay it. And then eventually you're like, okay, I can't keep delaying this. Like, I have to do something more now. And so I think so often we get caught into, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I should do. This is what I have to do. And we forget there's all these other options around us. So when you talk about your Z-isms and pearls of wisdoms, how do you get around that? How do you get to the point of being innovative and looking for new things?
Well, I think that, first of all, there are, you're not going to reinvent every wheel. So there are best practices out there. There are trends that are out there. I mean, the pendulum has really swung here with COVID. You're demonstrating right now in real time, right? Coming up with this. It's a wonderful concept. It's an actuality now, right? You brought it to life, and people, it wasn't very long ago. It's like, oh yeah, I'll do a Zoom, or, of course they're virtual workers, but now it's the norm. And so you might not have, if we went back a year and we said, well, let's do something like this, which would have, of course, been innovative, but it would have been much of the norm. It wouldn't maybe have been a draw. And so while we don't have the opportunity to go and do book signings or coffee shop tours or bookstore tours or what have you, we're finding ways to adapt to what really is, potentially the silver lining, a bigger picture, a bigger audience that now are there that wouldn't otherwise see that as a normality. So I think the answer to the question is just, changing with the times to a certain degree, seeing what other people are doing. You probably won't be the last person to do 24 authors in 12 hours. You might be the first person to do that. It's a great idea. So I think following in the footsteps of the, the likes of you and otherwise are the things people can consider pursuing. And then you gotta follow through and do it.
So I think you brought up a great point there. And so I'm actually doing a second 24 authors in 12 hours, November 11th. It's going to feature James Woosley's Free Agent Press, which is who I use for my book publishing. And James is a Air Force veteran. I'm an Army veteran. We decided let's do this on Veterans Day. So it's going to be super exciting. So Great. We're hoping to do the 24 authors in 12 hours, like a little bit of a series we'll kind of see and explore like where we go. We're about a little over halfway through For Matt, I'm going to cut him a little bit short because I am going to take a quick, like 3 to 5 minute break in between authors this time. For those of you who have been following the whole time, like this is really this marathon session. I am drinking lots of water and coffee, and it is a super fun, actual live experience with my dog barking and everything that happens in the live world. And one of the things is people go to the book festivals where we can pick up the books and we can touch them is for free giveaways. So my books are going to be available all day on Kindle. You can download them absolutely free. So please take a look at the Project Manager and the Consummate Communicator. Matt, what are you going to be doing today?
Sure. Well, there's a resource in the book that I'm making available called a self-care report card. And it's now on the website and downloadable. The website, if I may, is mattzinman.com. And of course, there someone can go and read the first part of the book, and they'll know if for free, and they'll know same thing as Amazon, right? And know if they want to keep reading, by buying it. But now the self-care report card is free. It's an accountability tool based on best practices of taking care of yourself, and it's very just a few minutes a week that I think is an easy way to keep track and encourage yourself to score well on it. So feel free to download that now, and it's just proper physical health, mental health, just a couple facets of what the book's about.
So I think you bring up a great point on this concept of a checklist, a scorecard, all these kinds of things, because people discount the simple tools. And I think often like we're looking for like this grand thing that's going to fix it all or change it all. But sometimes those simple tools can be the most effective way for us to make change. What other simple techniques do you have for people out there?
Well, for example, and I'm just going to point to some of the tools in the book. We talk about how we experience life and the filters that we have along those lines, one of which is earned confidence in terms of remaining in the present, not getting hung up on regrets or resentments, or in the future of worry and anxiety and stress. Are we being present? That's really where the joy in life is. That's where gratitude, of course, comes into play. As well as self-kindness, which is another major component of the book. And Amy, don't let me forget, because if that is one thing I really want to make sure that we talk about. And then, of course, you've got mood health. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is the fact that I've had to contend with depression since my early teens. And that's certainly something that's a major life impact, but that is all the more reason why you have to take such good care of yourself in order, because if you experience that, how much you never want to experience that. And the self-care report card is part of that. And then the third is really perception itself in terms of how we experience life. And so there's a tool in the perception chapter called the perception snapshot. And it really is, again, like you said, a simple way of just stepping back and taking stock, especially when you're going through certain challenges and trying to get your arms around things, because life is so unexpected at times and all the moving parts in it. And it enables you to really take that snapshot of, well, are my basic life needs being met? Just go there. And am I healthy? Is everyone around me healthy? Hopefully. Beyond those two things, I mean, everything else is kind of life. And I'm not looking to minimize the challenge that, you're never always, it's rare that you're going to have all the checks, right, in the positive column on all of these things, your relationships, your finances, your work-life balance, whatever that is to you. But it's a good way to step back and say, you know what? I do have a roof over my head. I'm okay. And to really recognize, what you had to be grateful for, and all things being relative, that again, while you may be in some financial difficulty right now, and you may again not have the answers, you'll figure it out. You always have, and you will again, and just keep going as hard as it is. And it kind of it kind of takes these things outside of yourself to give you the opportunity to look back at them and realize, I'm okay.
I think that's really powerful. And you touched on kindness, which to me is just so close to my heart. And to have that recognition that you don't know what other people are going through. So always defer to civility and kindness. So you said keep you honest, make sure you talk about this concept. So could you go into the kindness factor a bit more?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think, again, to your point, when people think of kindness, the natural default is, well, it's kindness toward others. And what I'm really talking about here is more about self-kindness. And the reason is, and of course, this, this being a personal development book and things around, the big concepts of self-esteem and self-love, those can be very difficult to get your arms around. Like, okay, I want to feel that way about myself. How do I get from here to there? It's somewhat vague, and so when you look at self-kindness, it really is a this or that. In any given circumstance, you're either being kind to yourself or you're not. And so it provides that foundational stepping stone for personal development and kind of that barometer to know how to handle like situations. So if you're a people pleaser, if you have a hard time saying no, and you're always like, I really need to say no, more often. The challenge with that is that if you don't say no, then you feel terrible about knowing that you should have, and then you got to do what it is that you didn't say no to, and you feel worse about that. But if you're in that moment and you say to yourself, well, would it be kind to myself to say no or yes? Really, right? If the answer is no, it would not be kind, say no. And step back from that and say, I'd really, what does it mean to say no? I'd really love to be able to help you, but right now I've got this or that going on. It's just not the right time for me to do that. Okay. What are they going to say? And people who are, frankly, prone to be manipulative have a tendency to look for people who are people pleasers, who they can, lean into, to kind of bend to their will in that way. And it really is important to stand up for yourself. So self-kindness is, if someone says, I get to the end of an interview and I know there's only so much we can cover in our brief conversation here, what's the one thing you want people to take away? It's the question to ask is, well, why be anything less than kind to yourself? And the answer should be easy. And that being the answer, then the outcome is then never be anything less than kind to yourself. And that is the guiding principle that is within earned confidence that I think, again, gives that foundation for everything else that there is to build on.
And you bring up such a good point about this self-kindness. And, we're inclined to be kind to others, maybe, but not ourselves. And it's so easy to beat yourself up and be that inner critic and tell yourself all the things that you do wrong instead of celebrating yourself and the things that we do right. And I think that right now, when people are struggling, they need to hear that message more than ever. So I am going to wrap this up. We have about 2 minutes. What are your last Z-isms, your pearls of wisdoms that you want to share before we have to end the segment?
Wow, there's a lot of the book that we haven't touched on. I think that, first of all, there's a lot having to do with I think we really focused on going within, and there's certainly a lot in there around relationships and personal interactions, both in business and reflecting my entrepreneur experience, but also relationships. I was a single dad. I had multiple relationships I learned a lot from. Again, I'm remarried now. Wow. Well, beyond kindness, I'd say going into the relationship arena, don't keep a scorecard. Don't keep a scorecard. I think they're a relationship killer. And in terms of someone who has a hard time forgiving, again, back to earn confidence, staying in the present, not holding on to regrets and anger and resentment. If you have a hard time forgiving somebody, make forgiveness about yourself. That comes back to self-kindness. Why would you want to feel those feelings of anger toward someone? Let it go, even as hard as that might be. And letting the past be the past is whether it's in a relationship or regrets that you have personally, being kind to yourself and letting those things go and staying present and being grateful and breaking the habits that you have, like around worrying and, negative self-talk. That's where the joy in life is and what you need to do to work at in order to have more of it.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Matt. I really wish we had more. I love pursuing this path. Thank you so much for being here and have a fantastic day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.